January 22nd, 1991, 10:30 p.m. An RAF Chinook helicopter flies low across the Iraqi desert. Inside, 8 men from B Squadron, 22nd SAS Regiment. Their call sign, Bravo 20. Their mission, infiltrate deep behind enemy lines, establish an observation post along the main supply route between Baghdad and northwestern Iraq, and hunt Scud missile launchers. Each man carries 210 pounds of equipment, ammunition, explosives, radios, food, water, enough gear to sustain an 8-man patrol for 14 days in the desert. The Chinook lands. The patrol jumps out, and in less than 72 hours, 3 men will be dead, 4 captured and tortured, and only 1 will escape, walking 300 kilometers to Syria in what would become the longest evasion by a British soldier in history. Bravo 20 would become the most famous SAS operation since World War II. The patrol commander, writing under the pseudonym Andy McNabb, published a book that sold over 1.5 million copies. Another patrol member, Chris Ryan, wrote his own account that became an international bestseller. Both men became millionaires. The mission was turned into a BBC film starring Sean Bean. But here's the problem. The two accounts contradict each other on almost every major detail. Years later, a third patrol member, Mike Coburn, published his own book claiming both McNabb and Ryan had fabricated large portions of their stories. And then Michael Asher, a former SAS reservist and desert expert, retraced the patrol's route, interviewed Iraqi witnesses, and concluded that much of what McNabb and Ryan wrote was fiction. This is the story of Bravo 20, not the heroic version, not the best-selling version, but what actually happened when 8 SAS soldiers walked into the Iraqi desert and everything went wrong. To understand Bravo 20, you have to understand why the SAS was in Iraq at all. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990, Britain committed forces to the coalition. The 22nd SAS Regiment deployed to Saudi Arabia, but initially they had no clear role. American Special Forces handled most reconnaissance missions. The air war was supposed to dominate. The SAS feared they'd sit out the entire conflict. Then Iraq started firing Scud missiles at Israel. Saddam Hussein wanted to drag Israel into the war, hoping that would fracture the Arab coalition. If Israel retaliated, Arab nations like Saudi Arabia and Egypt might withdraw their support for liberating Kuwait. The coalition needed to stop the Scuds, but finding mobile missile launchers in the vast Iraqi desert was nearly impossible. Satellites couldn't track them in real time. Aircraft couldn't find them at night. The only option, put special operations teams on the ground to hunt the launchers. That's where the SAS came in. B Squadron was tasked with Scud hunting operations in western Iraq. 3 8-man patrols would deploy, Bravo 10, Bravo 20, and Bravo 30. Each patrol would infiltrate different sectors along Iraq's main supply routes, establish observation posts, and either call in airstrikes on Scud launchers or destroy them directly. Bravo 10 and Bravo 30 took Land Rover 110 vehicles, fast, mobile, able to reposition quickly if compromised, able to carry extra ammunition, food, water, able to escape if things went wrong. Bravo 20, commanded by Sergeant Stephen Mitchell, who would later write under the pseudonym Andy McNabb, chose to go in on foot. No vehicles, just 8 men, 210 pounds of gear each, walking into enemy territory. Why? Different accounts give different reasons. McNabb claimed vehicles would be too noisy, too visible, better to stay low profile on foot. Chris Ryan, the patrol signaller, later said it was a terrible decision from the start. Other SAS patrols using Land Rovers had great success. Bravo 20's decision to go without vehicles left them with no escape option if compromised. And they would be compromised almost immediately. The patrol consisted of 8 men. Sergeant Stephen Andy McNabb Mitchell, Patrol Commander, Royal Green Jackets, experienced SAS operator. Corporal Colin Chris Ryan Armstrong, signaller, the man who would walk 300 kilometers to Syria. Lance Corporal Ian Dinger Preing, Parachute Regiment, would be captured and tortured. Trooper Robert Bob Consiglio would be killed during the escape attempt. Sergeant Vince Phillips, the veteran, 36 years old, would die of hypothermia. Trooper Stephen Legs Lane, Royal Engineers, would drown trying to cross the Euphrates River. Trooper Malcolm Stan McGowan, Australian Special Forces Exchange, would be captured. Trooper Mike Coburn, New Zealand SAS Exchange, would be captured. Years later, he'd publish a book contradicting McNabb and Ryan's accounts. The patrol landed approximately 30 kilometers west of the town of Karbala, near the main supply route between Baghdad and the northwestern front. Their orders: establish an observation post, monitor Scud activity, and either call in airstrikes or destroy launchers with law rockets and explosives. But from the moment they landed, things went wrong. The first problem: the weather. January 1991 was one of the coldest winters Iraq had experienced in decades. Temperatures at night dropped well below freezing. The ground was frozen solid. This mattered because the patrol needed to dig in, create a camouflaged observation post, bury themselves in the desert so Iraqi forces couldn't see them. But the ground was too hard. Picks bounced off frozen earth. They couldn't dig. They couldn't build proper defensive positions. The second problem: the radios. The patrol carried two types: a TACBE beacon for communicating with coalition aircraft, and a PRC-319 patrol radio for contacting headquarters. Neither worked. The TACBE couldn't reach passing aircraft. The PRC-319, according to multiple patrol members, had been given the wrong frequencies. They couldn't contact base. They were completely isolated. McNabb's book claims the radios were fine, that communications just weren't established early enough. Ryan and Coburn both say the radios never worked. Michael Asher's investigation suggested the patrol had been issued incorrect crypto codes, making communication impossible. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Bravo 20 was alone in enemy territory with no way to call for help. The third problem, and the one that doomed the mission, was the location itself. McNabb's account claims the patrol walked 20 kilometers from the landing zone to the observation post on the first night. Ryan's and Coburn's accounts say they walked only 2 kilometers. Asher's investigation, using GPS coordinates and interviews with locals, supports Ryan and Coburn. The patrol was dropped much closer to inhabited areas than they realized. On January 24th, the second day after insertion, the patrol was discovered. McNabb's book describes a young shepherd herding goats who stumbled across their position. Ryan's book describes a bulldozer driver spotting them. Asher's interviews with Iraqi witnesses, including the family who found the patrol, support the bulldozer story. A local worker operating construction equipment near a pipeline saw armed men in military gear and reported them. Either way, the patrol knew they were compromised. They had two options: stay and fight or run. They ran. What happened next is where the accounts diverge most dramatically. McNabb's book describes a running firefight with Iraqi armored personnel carriers and hundreds of soldiers. The patrol engaging with law rockets, destroying vehicles, killing Iraqi troops, a heroic withdrawal under heavy fire. Ryan's book describes a similar engagement, though with less dramatic casualties. Coburn's book and Asher's investigation tell a different story. According to Asher's interviews with Iraqi police and civilians who were present, there was no major firefight. The patrol encountered local police, not Iraqi army regulars. There was some gunfire but no tanks, no APCs, and no mass casualties. The Iraqis Asher interviewed said the patrol ran before any serious engagement occurred. Peter Ratcliffe, regimental sergeant major of 22 SAS during the Gulf War, wrote in his own book that the post-mission debriefing, recorded on video, mentioned no contacts with large numbers of enemies or extraordinary incidents. The patrol had been compromised, engaged briefly with local forces, and fled. So what's the truth? Somewhere between McNabb's heroic firefight and Asher's claim of minimal contact, the patrol was discovered, there was gunfire, and they ran, abandoning most of their equipment, food, and water in the process. The patrol's escape plan was simple: walk northwest to Syria, about 200 kilometers through open desert, in winter, with minimal supplies. They moved at night, hid during the day, but the cold was brutal: sub-zero temperatures, frozen desert, no shelter, and they'd left most of their cold-weather gear behind when they fled. On the first night of the escape, January 24th to 25th, the patrol covered approximately 85 kilometers on foot, an extraordinary feat of endurance, but it came at a cost. They were exhausted, hypothermic, running out of water. The patrol began to fragment. During the night march, the 8 men split into 2 groups. McNabb led one group of 5. Ryan led another group of 3 that included Vince Phillips and Malcolm McGowan. McNabb's group attempted to hijack an Iraqi taxi to drive the remaining distance to Syria. According to McNabb's book, they engaged in a firefight at a vehicle checkpoint near the border, killed multiple Iraqi soldiers, and were forced to abandon the plan. Bob Consiglio was killed during this engagement. According to Ryan and Asher, the events were different. The patrol did encounter a vehicle checkpoint, but the engagement was brief. Consiglio was killed, but the circumstances remain disputed. After the checkpoint firefight, McNabb's group fragmented further. Trooper Stephen "Legs" Lane attempted to cross the Euphrates River to reach Syria. He drowned. Mike Coburn was separated and captured. McNabb ran out of ammunition and was captured near Al-Karabila on January 27th. Lance Corporal Dinger Preing had already been captured separately. That left Ryan's 3-man group. Vince Phillips, the veteran sergeant, was struggling. The cold was killing him: hypothermia, frostbite, exhaustion. On the night of January 26th to 27th, Phillips became separated from Ryan and McGowan in the darkness. He died alone in the desert, 36 years old. The SAS Regimental Roll of Honor states he died of exposure while evading capture. Both McNabb and Ryan's books blamed Phillips for various mistakes during the mission: poor navigation, slow movement, equipment failures. After Phillips died and couldn't defend himself, the blame intensified. Michael Asher's investigation challenged this. Asher argued that Phillips, the oldest and most experienced member of the patrol, was being scapegoated for leadership failures by McNabb, blaming a dead man who couldn't respond. On January 26th, Ryan and McGowan encountered an Iraqi goat herder. The man offered to help them find a vehicle. McGowan decided to go with him. Ryan decided it was too risky and stayed behind. They agreed McGowan would return by 6:30 p.m. McGowan never returned. According to Ryan's account, McGowan shot and killed an unarmed Iraqi civilian as he tried to commandeer a vehicle, then engaged 2 more armed with AK-47s before running out of ammunition and being captured. McGowan's own account, years later, disputes this. He says he was captured after running out of ammunition but denies killing unarmed civilians. That left Ryan alone, the sole remaining member of Bravo 20 still evading capture. What Chris Ryan did next is undisputed and extraordinary. Starting on January 27th, Ryan walked solo through the Iraqi desert toward Syria, 300 kilometers, in winter, with minimal food and water, hunted by Iraqi police and military. He subsisted on stream water, risking dysentery. He ate plants he wasn't sure were safe. He caught small animals. He hid in ditches and culverts during the day to avoid patrols. He suffered frostbite, dehydration, and hallucinations. At one point, according to Ryan's book, he engaged a small Iraqi convoy pursuing him. Asher dismisses this as embellishment, but what's certain is that Ryan kept moving, 1 foot in front of the other. 7 days, 300 kilometers. On February 10, 1991, Ryan crossed into Syria near Abu Kamel. Syrian secret police detained him initially, rough treatment, suspicion he was a spy. But once his identity was confirmed, he was released to coalition forces. Ryan had completed the longest evasion by a British soldier in history. Solo, on foot, through enemy territory. It's an achievement no one disputes. Even Asher acknowledges Ryan's endurance was remarkable. But Ryan's escape came at a cost. 3 men dead, 4 captured and tortured. McNabb, Preing, Coburn, and McGowan were held in Iraqi custody for 6 weeks. McNabb's book describes brutal torture, beatings, teeth extraction, burning with heated spoons, interrogation techniques designed to break them. The captives fell back on a prearranged cover story. They were medics on a combat search and rescue mission whose helicopter made an emergency landing. The Iraqis didn't believe them. Eventually, McNabb gave a confession that they were a reconnaissance patrol monitoring Iraqi movements on the main supply route. Mike Coburn's book, published years later, contradicts McNabb's torture account. Coburn says, "Incidents such as teeth extraction and burning with a heated spoon did not happen. It is inconceivable that any such incidents could have occurred without them being discussed or being physically obvious." When McGowan and Preing were released on March 5th, a Red Cross representative described them as in good shape. No evidence of the extreme torture McNabb described. So was McNabb lying, or exaggerating, or did he experience interrogation techniques that didn't leave permanent physical marks? The truth is unknowable. What's certain is that the men were held, interrogated, and mistreated, but the extent of the torture remains disputed. The 4 captured men were released after the ceasefire on March 5, 1991. They returned to Britain as heroes. McNabb was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the second highest award for gallantry after the Victoria Cross. Ryan, Consiglio posthumously, and Lane posthumously received the military medal. And then the books started coming. In 1993, McNabb published Bravo 20. It became an instant bestseller. Over 1.5 million copies sold in the UK alone. International editions followed. A BBC television film starring Sean Bean brought the story to millions more viewers. In 1995, Chris Ryan published The One That Got Away, another bestseller. Ryan launched a second career as an author, writing military thrillers and young adult novels. Both men became millionaires. The SAS, traditionally secretive about its operations, suddenly had 2 of its members publishing detailed accounts of a classified mission. It was unprecedented. And almost immediately, questions arose. The first questions came from within the regiment itself. Peter Ratcliffe, who debriefed the patrol after their return, wrote in his book Eye of the Storm that McNabb's published account didn't match what was said in the debriefing. No mention of engaging hundreds of Iraqi troops, no extraordinary incidents, no mass enemy casualties. Ratcliffe also criticized McNabb's estimate of 250 enemy killed. Counter to any proven theory of military kill ratios, Ratcliffe wrote, 8 men, on the run, with limited ammunition, killing 250 enemy soldiers. Implausible. Then came Michael Asher. In 2001, Asher, a former SAS reservist, Arabist, and desert explorer, retraced Bravo 20's route. He interviewed Iraqi families who had encountered the patrol, police officers who had pursued them, civilians who witnessed events. Asher's findings were published in a 2002 book, The Real Bravo 20, and a Channel 4 documentary of the same name. Asher's conclusions were devastating. The patrol never encountered Iraqi army regulars, only police and armed civilians. There was no major firefight. The engagement McNabb described never happened. The patrol accounted for 0 confirmed enemy casualties, not 250, not even 1. The heroic tales of destroying tanks with law rockets, mowing down hundreds of soldiers, silently stabbing sentries, none of it happened. Asher accused McNabb and Ryan of fabrication, of creating a fictional account to sell books, of turning a mission that went disastrously wrong into a heroic tale of SAS superhuman toughness. Both McNabb and Ryan reacted angrily to Asher's investigation. They denied his conclusions, but they couldn't refute the testimonies of Iraqi witnesses who were there. Then in 2004, Mike Coburn published his account, Soldier 5. Coburn had been gagged by the British Ministry of Defense for years. They'd gone to court to prevent publication. But Coburn, a New Zealander, not bound by British military law in the same way, fought through New Zealand courts to publish. His book contradicted McNabb and Ryan on almost every major point. The torture McNabb described, Coburn said it didn't happen. The mass enemy casualties, never mentioned in debriefings. The heroic firefight, Coburn described it as brief contact with local police. Coburn also accused McNabb of poor leadership, of refusing advice from superiors to take vehicles, of overloading the patrol with unnecessary equipment, of making decisions that doomed the mission. The British government's attempts to suppress Coburn's book only made the controversy worse. Why was the Ministry of Defense so desperate to silence him? What were they trying to hide? So what's the truth about Bravo 20? The mission happened. 8 SAS soldiers inserted behind enemy lines. The mission was compromised. 3 men died: Consiglio, Lane, and Phillips. 4 were captured: McNabb, Preing, Coburn, and MacGowan. 1 escaped: Ryan. Those facts are undisputed. But almost everything else is contested. Did the patrol engage in a major firefight? Probably not on the scale McNabb described. Did they kill hundreds of Iraqis? Almost certainly not. Were they tortured? Yes, though probably not as brutally as McNabb claimed. Did Ryan engage an Iraqi convoy during his escape? Probably embellishment. Was McNabb a hero or a poor commander who got 3 men killed? Depends who you ask. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the middle. The patrol made mistakes. The mission was poorly planned. Equipment failed. Communications failed. Men died. But the survivors also showed extraordinary courage and endurance. Ryan's 300-kilometer escape is real. The captured men endured weeks of captivity and interrogation. They survived. The problem is that McNabb and Ryan turned survival into superhuman heroics. They sold a narrative the public wanted. SAS supermen killing hundreds of enemies and enduring torture that would break anyone else. And that narrative made them millionaires. While the men who died, Consiglio, Lane, Phillips, couldn't tell their side of the story. Bravo 20 changed the SAS. After the controversy, the Ministry of Defense introduced confidentiality agreements. Serving members could no longer publish memoirs without approval. Soldiers who refused to sign faced being returned to their original units. The agreements came too late to stop McNabb and Ryan, but they prevented future Bravo 20s. No more tell-all books, no more public disputes about classified missions. The SAS went back to being what it had always been, secret. Today, 33 years later, Bravo 20 remains the most famous SAS mission since World War II, and the most controversial. McNabb's book has sold millions of copies. It's taught in military academies as an example of survival under extreme conditions. The BBC film is considered a classic of military cinema. But ask anyone who studied the mission, military historians, SAS veterans, investigators like Asher, and they'll tell you the same thing. The published accounts are fiction, based on real events, yes, but heavily embellished, dramatized, sold as the true story when much of it wasn't true at all. Does that diminish what the men endured? No. 3 men died, 4 were captured. 1 walked 300 kilometers to Syria. Those are real sacrifices, real courage. But it raises uncomfortable questions. If the SAS, Britain's most elite unit, can't tell the truth about a mission, who can? If soldiers write books that contradict each other and fabricate enemy casualties, what does that say about military memoirs? And maybe that's the real lesson of Bravo 20. Not that the SAS is invincible, but that they're human. They make mistakes. Missions go wrong. And sometimes survival is more about luck than skill. If you served with the SAS or have thoughts on Bravo 20, share them in the comments. And subscribe to Gulf War Chronicles for more untold stories from Desert Storm. Until next time.